Welcome back to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. I'm Josh Goldberg, and we're back with our panel episode where we'll be talking about AI hype, crawler controversies, the web dev job market, and how frameworks and platforms from Vercel to GitHub are evolving in the AI era. But before we get into it, let's welcome our panel. First off, we have Paige Niedringhaus, staff software engineer at Blues and co-host of the weekly Front End Fire web development podcast. Welcome, Paige.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
Next up, we have Paul Mikulkis, PodRocket host and YouTuber. Hi, Paul.
Hey, Josh. Happy to be here and talk about what we're going to be talking about today.
And last but not least, we have Noel Minchow, who is a PodRocket host as well. Noel, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Josh?
I am so excited to be talking about this lovely set of stuff with y'all. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about today. Let's move right on to section one, the recent news. We had a lovely post recently by Edward Zitron arguing that Anthropic, one of the major AI labs, may be burning cash at unsustainable rates, selling access to their cloud models at pricing that doesn't cover inference costs. The post claims that without a major breakthrough in monetization, the company could face serious financial strain in the next 12 to 18 months. We've seen other posts taking aim at what the author calls AI bubble euphoria, kind of peak of the Gartner hype cycle, and a lot of exaggerated claims about what AI is or is not able to do. So let's discuss. What was your gut reaction to this piece, everyone?
Are we supposed to be surprised?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all either. I was like, I feel like this is just par for the course. Like, you know, everyone's in that like cash burn, try to get market share, squeeze out competition mode. Maybe that it's like the magnitude here is kind of the sticker shock we're supposed to feel, but I don't know. It could be pretty severe, I guess. Maybe we're in a world where it's like, is this even viable, like with the current tech? But I don't feel like we have good enough data, just kind of based off of this projection, to really know one way or the other.
The news has talked a lot about OpenAI burning through VC money just as fast as it possibly can to keep up with the demand for ChatGPT. So it's not surprising that Anthropic is going through the same issues. I was a little bit surprised by the amount that the author was estimating that devs are burning through, but also knowing developers and being one myself, I can see how people would just set up Claude Code and let it run forevermore. When they recently actually throttled that, I saw an announcement that they were pulling back on the unlimited spend that some people were doing with Claude Code. But I don't know if Anthropic is going to be, if this is going to take them under. That's the question. Like, they have established themselves, I think, well enough to compete, especially when it comes to developers who absolutely love what they're doing, that I think they'll be able to survive purely based on coders alone.
In the first month of using Claude Code, as a coder, Paige as well, I was tracking my credits on Claude Code because you can track like the at credit cost, and I think I almost hit 10K spending $200.
Wow.
Yeah. It adds up. And another thing is, I think this picture isn't painted in like all factors considered. Like, the major cost we're talking about is electricity. It takes so much to power these units that do the inference. But I totally see a future in 15 years that every other town has a nuclear reactor in it. Like, that's a thing that's happening. People are okay with it, and it's good, arguably, for many reasons. And this is one of them. We get really cheap power. Is that factored into the, okay, in 10 years, where are we going to be? I don't know, but it's a very important aspect to call out. There's external macro influences here that are going to affect that cost curve drastically. Very curious to see how that happens. Yeah, I mean, hey, that's why all the Bitcoin miners are in China. Cheap coal.
This might be a record for PodRocket. Time to nuclear reactors in every town.
I don't know. I have to check that one. I'm not convinced. It may not be.
We'll get back to you. On the difference between this and previous hype cycles, such as Web3 or VR, you mentioned the magnitude here. Do you think that this is going to suffer or behave similarly to previous hype cycles, or do you think it'll behave a little differently?
I feel like for like Web3 and like here, I feel like this feels a little bit different to me in that like the proof of demand is already there. It's like, obviously people want this thing because like the problem is that like, you know, devs are using it so heavily, and like you know, people are using prompting for all kinds of stuff already, and like it seems to be the case that like devs using it as a coding assistant or like tool or whatever we want to call this is like proving to at least be useful to them in the short term. So like it feels like this cycle is going to inherently be different in that there's like, instead of like this being kind of like, oh, this would be cool, I don't want to say like pie in the sky kind of thing, but like, you know, it was like a little bit more aspirational on a lot of these other trends or nebulous. Like this is very concretely like this is providing value to people, and now we have to like get the knobs figured out on how this works long term and is sustainable and continuable. So like, you know, that feels a little bit different. And I think like to Paige's point about devs using, like, I think that there is this, I think is kind of like the most extreme case that we're seeing across the board, like with OpenAI burning through cash just in handling the prompts. It's just like, as a dev using a tool like this, you can just like, you can prompt so much so quickly, and like you can just consume it so much more rapidly. And I think it'll be interesting to see, like, I think there will be improvements. Like, we'll get better at optimization. We'll get better at figuring out, like, what context matters when. The models will get better. But I think, like, it is, there is going to be, this is kind of like my initial point of the scale of the cash burn is, like, an interesting thing here compared to these, like, other patterns in the past. So I think it'll be interesting to see, will there be, like, a period where we're all paying a ton more to be able to do this? Will that drive usage down enough where it's not really happening? I feel like there's so many variables right now.
I mean, I think that both Web3 and kind of the AR, VR hype cycle were a lot more niche than AI, or what we're calling AI right now, has established itself to be. So I think that in that regard, it's not going to die down in the way that those two things have already. I think it's so much more widespread, and there are so many more use cases for it, way beyond just coding. You know, people are using it for math. They're using it to write books. They're using it to write all sorts of things. They're using it as a doctor to like check their symptoms. It's really astounding the different things that people have figured out how to do with it. So I don't think that it's going to disappear. I mean, wasn't there an outcry a couple of weeks ago when ChatGPT 5 launched, and people who had formed these really parasocial relationships with their ChatGPT 4.0 bots disappeared suddenly, and OpenAI had to bring them back because people were, you know, going mad online for it. So yeah, I think it's here to stay whether we like it or not. It just probably depends more on will it be good enough that people will continue to use it, or will it eventually taper off and people will figure out what it's good for and what it's not good at and kind of use it for those things, and then just, you know, ignore using it for the things that it really just isn't very good at.
Paige, I feel very similar about ignoring the things it's not good at, because we're not ignoring a lot right now. And I think maybe when I hear headlines about bubble, that's what I see when I see bubble. There's a lot of folks out there who are making apps or services where they slap AI on it and they're like, okay, well, it's this new thing. To me, that's the same situation as some guy opening up a pasta restaurant and telling me that his pasta is better than everybody else's pasta, and that's why his restaurant's going to do great. But that's not to say that that's a small piece. It's just a layer of this awesome cornucopia of ideas and fields that are coming together. So yeah, the bubble argument is difficult to see through when you see things working, especially the doctor stuff. That blows my mind that's it's been helping people, you know, so that's not very bubble-esque.
No, I mean, and it's like, it is search now, right? Like, you open Google, like, you Google something, and it's like, you get Google Gemini's blurb at the top. And like, I'd love to see some of their numbers. Like, it's just like, people, like, it's happening. Like, there's no, like, 90% of internet users changing their behavior is like, that doesn't feel bubble-ish. It's like, no, this is a movement of some kind. So,
but Google has a unique perspective, or a unique position, I guess, in that everybody practically uses Chrome already. So it's kind of like they can just shove AI into it. But every other tool that I have, like Zoom or LinkedIn or Notion or Confluence or what, name the SaaS tool, it's like, oh, we've got some new AI features. Do you want to try those out? And absolutely every time I'm like, no, I don't. How do I disable this or turn it off or not have it do summaries because they're terrible? So I think that part of the AI bubble is going to collapse pretty quickly on itself, where they, like Paul was saying, they just bolted it in there, but it actually isn't useful or helpful or accurate. But I think that the people who, or the companies that have taken more time to be more prescriptive in how they are using AI to enhance their features and offerings that they probably already have, that's probably going to continue to get better. But everybody who's just like, hey, we have an AI chatbot, or we've got an AI assistant, or we can do this with AI, I don't think that's going to last. I think a lot of those features are either going to get defunded, those companies are going to fold, or yeah, they're just not going to gain any traction and they're going to run out of money from investors.
You have a niche curved out already that you are able, you're already applying a thing. It's like, I think AI will just become part of the stack. Like we had like, good like contextual search and all these things historically. It just like became part of it. It's not really advertised or thought about. It's just like, this is just how we solve this class of problems now. Like, I think that is already happening and will continue to. This like super hyper marketing around it will probably curb off a little bit. And yeah, companies that are like totally that's the whole thing, like I'm sure there'll be some that succeed and stuff, but it's like, there'll be some rocky times for some of those companies ahead for sure.
And like Paige, you mentioned if you already have a specialty and you want AI to augment, I think this bleeds beautifully into the 10x engineer conversation.
What a great segue. Thank you. Yes, let's talk about that. So there's for a long time been this kind of parodied 10x engineer trope that some people take seriously and some folks very much don't. But the 10x AI engineer is becoming something of a trope of its own. And there's a great recent blog post from a person named Colton saying AI makes engineers 10x more productive as a meme that it may speed up some workflows, but doesn't replace deep engineering skill. So how do we feel about this? Do we feel the anxiety is justified, or is this just part of the normal tech cycle we've been talking about for 12 minutes?
A 10x engineer with AI was already like a 9x engineer.
Yeah. I think that's
like they already have their
accurate.
specialty. Like Paige was saying, they figured something out and now they're just enhancing. Not to say though that there's not going to be less experienced folks that have an easier time fostering those skills, but like key here, fostering the skills so that then you can enhance them. Yeah, there's core skill.
I've read enough blog posts by both non-technical people who have discovered the fun and the profit of vibe coding, but also from a bunch of engineers who have been doing this for decades, and well-known people too, like Adi Osmani is a really good one. He's been a great resource for it in particular. But a lot of people are realizing and understanding that, yes, you can get something up and running very quickly, even if you don't know what you're doing with vibe coding or with, having some of these tools to help you. But you're going to either end up in a mess of spaghetti code really fast because the AIs just go off the rails all the time. Or if you know what you're doing, you're going to be able to guide them and keep them within the bounds of building software that's going to last. And that's what I found with my own experiences too, using Claude Code and things like that, is that Claude, I'll even point it towards the files that I want it to look at to see like how things are done in the code base, or this is this kind of we use CSS variables, or this is the kind of style that we want to call APIs. And Claude will still look at all that and then go and try and do something completely different. So unless you're aware of those architectural best practices, or you recognize that Claude's recreating like the same components but with different names, where it could just be one that's reused and shared across everything, you're still not going to do very well. And I think that's the thing that we all thought maybe AI was going to be better at than it is, but it will just make a whole heap of code when it doesn't need to, because it's, I guess, trying to over-engineer a solution instead of going with simpler, more straightforward or already written code that's there for it to use if it was aware of it.
Yeah, I feel like this, like duplicate code is like, I feel like it's so often the case. I'll I want to add some feature and I'll go prompt for it. And it's like, it adds like a whole new call stack. Every function's duplicated with like one extra variable it's piping through. It's like, why is this what we've chosen? And like, I don't think that's the only problem. It's just like those classes of problems where, in like, unless you already are in this mindset of like, no, it's going to cause problems if I have 3 different versions of this function, because then like maybe if I'm only ever always like doing vibe code prompting, it'll know to always update every version, but this is going to get out of hand very quickly. And maybe this will get better over time. Back to our prior discussion, I'm not convinced that it will, because this is like larger context windows, all that stuff. So yeah, like maybe it helps and it can be quicker, but I'm still having to look at all the code generated. So
there's an interesting aspect that the blog post talks about, the curing your AI 10x engineer anxiety. It's that the reporting or self-reporting of a lot of engineers is somewhat biased, that it's kind of hard to say, no, I'm not 10x more productive the way all my other developers are reporting as being from AI. Do we think that there's any psychological play in play here?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you go on any LinkedIn, Hacker News, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, and you'll see these people who are talking about this brand new thing that they just built in a weekend or 3 hours or whatever. So I think that there's so much FOMO that people are like, oh my God, I'm not using these tools right because I couldn't stand up a clone of the Nike website in 2 hours with, next to no help. So I think that there's a lot of that. But also, if you start to think about what your daily experience is like for doing, like the blog post even talks about like the things that can't be sped up after you've gotten the code written, which is having somebody else review it, addressing those comments, fixing those tests, like making sure all the CI stuff checks, and then actually getting the thing merged into production and deployed. There's a lot of that AI cannot do and shouldn't be doing, because humans need to be verifying that it works the way that it's expected, because AI will just glaze over and be like, yeah, everything looks good. We're just going to ignore that crash that just happened in the background. Don't worry about that console error. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that can be sped up, but maybe it's better, or maybe you get more benefit out of it if you're an indie developer or a developer who's not on a team or part of a big company and you're just shipping code all day. But I think for the majority of us who work on teams, who collaborate, who build long-running, long-standing applications, a lot of that just can't be sped up because it still needs to be done by people, and people just don't move at the speed of AI ever, and we won't.
We've talked a lot about the downsides or the lack of abilities for AIs, but I do want to spin a bit more positive a direction briefly. Do we have any success stories from our personal lives or work lives of using AI, things we've seen gone well?
Being in charge of a Kanban board myself, it has been game changing for connecting to GitHub and helping me manage that. It's stuff that already exists. It's already written, and I just need to know what's happening and who's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? So that it's very helpful for that. And it's also helpful for seeing like where people's talents lie, because I don't want everybody to be a 10x engineer. My entire database would exist in a Google Sheet if that was the case. Like, you want people who think differently, and AI helps, I think, sniff that out by allowing me to review, look at what everything is happening from afar, and like actually ingest it versus like lose all my time in the day. So from a review, monitoring, and then taking that information and using my own brain to like, what's that called? Iterate on that information. Very helpful.
I use Cursor all the time. Like, I'm still, like trying different models. I use Claude. Like, I'm using it all the time. Autocomplete, autocomplete, like, saves me a bunch. Like, I'm not writing as much boilerplate code. So yeah, I don't want to paint this in an overly negative light either. And I'm sure that has sped me up a little bit. It's the age old thing of like, the more time I spend engineering and working on larger projects, the less amount of time I'm sitting there writing code, right? Like, I'm looking through existing code and finding old bugs and like optimizing and all that stuff. So yeah, it's like there's you can assist there, like on prompting, like here's a giant stack trace, like here's the code I think it's happening, what could be going on. Like there's huge benefits there too. Like, don't get me wrong. It's just like, yeah, there's limited, this kind of like limited channels where, and I find AI to be super useful as an assistant. And that's, I feel like, kind of still the iteration we're in right now.
I've found it really useful for writing in languages that I don't typically use, like writing bash scripts. It's great for that because I always forget bash syntax by the time I need to write another script. GitHub CI CD workflows, that's great because I write those so rarely, and once they're working, I'll never look at them again. So for things that maybe I'm less familiar with or I'm less in the day-to-day, which I am for JavaScript and TypeScript and React and things, it's been really, really time saving for that because I have to go and like research how to do all these things. Whereas Claude and Cursor and ChatGPT already know all these things. They don't have to look it back up. They can just figure it out. And then I guess the feedback loop is so short that it's really quick to actually get to what you're trying to achieve versus, having to rerun the pipeline again or having to re-execute the script again and see if it pulls the right variables this time. So for that, it has definitely been a time saver and stuff that I just don't need to like devote a lot of time and learning to. And I just want to write a quick script of some sort. It's been great.
Writing
Well, that's
log
enough
statements.
positivity for now.
It's great. Yeah.
Let's move on to the next section of content because it is a really interesting play. There is a lot of stuff that AI is useful for. However, it's been noted recently that Cloudflare announced they will block AI crawlers by default on new domains, requiring explicit opt-in from site owners. There are concerns over resource drain, IP rights, unmonetized data. They even allege that Perplexity, the AI company, has been using undeclared crawlers to gather website content, despite sites perhaps having no crawl directives. Of course, this is disputed by Perplexity, but this is an incident with a lot of interesting questions around AI company ethics and data sourcing practices. So to start, in addition to robots.txt, are we going to have an AI.txt? What's the next step?
I feel like this very quickly becomes like a larger question in that, like, what is the role of robots.txt supposed to be? Like how do we want this to work? I guess, like, I feel like just if we shifted our framing a little bit and we said that, like, hey, this is a tool that we were using like for accessibility to like extract data out of a website or something like that, or someone had this special user agent where like it specifically instructed websites to render only text content or something like that, I feel like the optics around this would be very different versus it being like an LLM model. And even Perplexity has this. They have like two distinct user agents they use. One for like the crawler that's doing things behind the scenes, and one like if a user asks a specific question and like they're doing it in response to a query. In the blog post, Cloudflare goes into like how that's happening in both cases, but in all their testing, they explicitly are like setting up a website so the robots.txt is told to like not allow any scraping or scrapers to ignore it rather. But then they go and they prompt Perplexity to like hit that site and do something. And they're like, hey, it still does it. We have all this evidence. Maybe they have evidence of the former case as well with like the autonomous background scraping. But that latter case to me feels like something that like you as a website owner, if your information's public and accessible, I'm not sure if you should be able to say like, I don't want specific types of user agents to be able to access my content. Like that feels kind of like we've lost the thread of the intent of the robots.txt file. And maybe I'm in the minority here. But like that was like the first thing that came to mind when I was kind of reading this. So like, I think it is a concern. We don't want website data being scraped and used for like training and copyrighted material being picked up. But I feel like that's a different discussion than like how if doing it correctly and like we're not like overloading servers and like there's like good best intent here and like best technical practices are followed. Like I'm not sure that we as like there should be a layer here, a membrane in between, like can I allow certain agents to access my data, or if that's even going to ever be like a winning battle. Like I feel like that's just not going to be feasible with the current open extensible architecture of the internet.
I feel the same way. No, there's always a way.
Yeah.
Like there's always a way. CF proxy, go look it up on GitHub. You can request any Cloudflare site you want. You're welcome. Like you can do anything you want, and people will always figure out a way. I had one guy come to me on a Discord server. He's like, "Oh yeah, you just boot up like 1,000 T2 micros on AWS, and then you basically have your own botnet because they're basically free on Amazon." Like people figure out these crazy ways to do this, and it feels like putting a seawall against a rising ocean. I think we have to be smarter about how we willingly egress information online and how we make it accessible or not. It's kind of like up to the implementer or the team.
I think that's really going to become the problem, actually, is that people are going to realize that there really is no way to know for sure what AI companies are training on your data or not. And they're just going to stop putting the data out there to begin with. I think that's, and, I definitely am in favor of the open web. It's helped everybody so much in ways that we'll never even be able to begin to understand. But at the same time, I feel for the content creators who are putting time and effort and money and whatever else into doing these reviews or learning these things and sharing them. Like, they should get paid for that somehow. It seems just so unfair that these AI companies have crawled all of their data, have learned all the rules and tricks and tips and best practices and things from them, and give them no credit, nothing for the valuable information that they provided.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. That's what so maybe this is back to the question of like, do we need a new classification? Like maybe this is like, there needs to be signals on like, what is the, intellectual property here? How is that controlled? I just feel like right now it's very conflated with the technical flags we're using that are supposed to instruct how machines are talking to one another. And like, that feels like a misstep. So maybe that's my answer to this question, is like, we need more explicit, copyright, like indicators on content or something like that, or maybe better legislation around it.
What's interesting here too is what Paul was saying before. Even if we do have AI.text or better regulation or legal requirements, it's very hard to track through how these AIs came to their results, especially in areas that have a lot of creators. So how serious is it for an AI company to ignore no-crawl rules practically? Are there real ramifications that can be made? Is there any actual regulatory action that could be enforced?
Depends on the sector of copyright you're in.
The New York Times is trying to sue OpenAI right now, I think, and Disney, I think, as well, for copyright, like infringement of characters and source material like that. So they're trying.
Yeah, I remember like Sarah Silverman had that lawsuit like super early on. Like, it's yeah, because I feel like right now, I'm not an expert here, but I don't think there's anything like legally preventing you to technically like ignore a robot's TXT file, unless you're like abusing the website, and then there's laws against like DDoS like behavior, or like doing things with copyrighted material. Like, I don't think that there's any major legal ramification here in like a current precedent anyway. Especially again, like on non-copyrighted content.
If it's non-copyrighted, it just definitely depends on like what content we're talking about. And there's stuff that's in a gray area too. Like if I watched Noel walk for a week and then trained an AI model on his gait, so robots walk like Noel, is that Noel's gait?
It's a very inefficient gate for a robot.
I bring this up because there's companies out there that will listen to freely available, non-copyrighted sound recordings, and then they make these things called me models. And so you can like post a model. I mean, 11 Labs is doing something like this. Is that copyright? Is it a composition copyright? Is it a sound recording copyright? And like that'll change if it's a physical. So the robots.txt is kind of like this blanket, like follow this, but it definitely depends on what's behind the TXT.
Do we think that there will be any responsibility taken on by AI companies in the future in general to disclose their, say, data collection methods or sources?
I hope so. I don't have a lot of faith that that's what's going to happen, but I hope so.
It would not be a smart move on their part.
No.
Well, I mean, like, to be fair, so like Perplexity in this case where they send out their little like crawler in response to a user's prompt, and I think like OpenAI and stuff does this as well. Like they'll list sources, like you can go click a link, right? Like do the like see where they pulled their information. So there's that, but that feels very different. That's like feels like a different, like that kind of attribution feels like a different conversation than like the model training attribution, which is way harder because it's like, how do you even trace that back? So I don't know about that. The model training problem like that feels like I'm not sure there's a good clean answer to that one. Yeah, we'll see.
That's a great place to end the high-level discussion on AI and ethics. And let's move a little more towards practical code. Vercel just released V5 of its AI SDK, which includes type, save, chat APIs, agent loop control. There's a new Next.js, which unifies rendering and bundling. Plus, all of this happening at the same time that GitHub just had its CEO, Thomas Dohmke, step down. Microsoft is folding GitHub's leadership directly into its core AI team more explicitly without replacing the CEO role, and thus is signaling that it's going to be moving AI more and more into GitHub in the future, which has, to be honest, already been quite visibly happening. Let's talk about these kind of more granular events in the industry, starting with the Vercel AI SDK. Have we tried it? Have we seen the betas? Are we excited? What is our opinion on this?
It's easy to make parallel to calls with V5. Like, that's huge. AI chatbots won't take a year to respond.
Yeah, there's some very cool things that it seems like they've rolled out with V5 because there were a lot of changes that came along with it. I think a couple of the biggest one, like Paul was just saying, is that you can make tool calls. It can handle dynamic tool calls. So even if you don't necessarily know the input and output schema for a tool, the agents are still able to use them. Probably one of the biggest things for a lot of people who were building sort of UI chats in their own applications is that they've moved the chat rendering message away from like what's actually being persisted into a database or being sent to the model. So they've kind of extracted those two different pieces into different components, which makes it a lot easier to kind of handle rendering it in the UI versus sending it to an LLM for evaluation. I think a couple of the coolest things to me was that the fine-grained agent loop controls are better. So if you really want a user to confirm something during an LLM going through like whatever agent process it's going through, it'll stop. And you can tell it to stop and wait for confirmation and then continue its loop, which was very hit or miss before, as well as having a global provider for LLMs. So instead of having to know exactly what model and what URL and what API key and et cetera, it's been made a lot easier to be able to just say, I want to use ChatGPT 5.0, or I want to drop in Claude Sonnet 4.0, or I want to use whatever. They've really, really simplified that a lot. So if you have either a web app that uses multiple different models for different things, or you just want to give users the option of choosing different models to see what the outcomes will be like, that's, I think, a really nice improvement.
Building a good chat experience is not trivial either. There's a lot that goes into server-client communication. There's a lot of choices you can make. SSE, sockets, none. Be creative with it, I guess. Long polling, short polling. But having that streamlined and a little bit more opinionated is beautiful. Because being able to throw a chat into a Next.js app like that, I'm honestly scared. It's so easy. Like we talked about AI slop apps. Oh, God.
Yeah.
God, what's coming?
Mm-hmm.
Watch out, YouTube. Yeah.
It does really raise the bar for to-do list MVC. Back in the day, if you wanted to show a new UI framework like React, the new thing, you made a to-do list. Now, Slop can do a pretty darn good job of it. We're going to have a new starter application template. All right, but let's move on to the second of the two kind of industry actions. The GitHub CEO, how do we feel about first him telling folks that if you aren't using AI, you should get out of the field, and then himself getting out of this specific part of the field?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's part of it. I feel like we've all said like how much just like little menial work we've all offloaded. So I feel like that there is something to the like, hey, stop doing redundant tasks and all that. Like, I think there is a little bit of merit to that. I feel like people shouldn't be taking that and being like, oh no, I'm not just doing prompting 40 hours a week instead of writing any code. Like there's a happy medium there. I don't know. I feel like the whole optics of folding GitHub into like the AI part of the Microsoft org is a little like
It's a little weird.
That feels a little funky because I feel like most of GitHub's biggest advancements in the last, I don't know, 10 years have like not been that. Like GitHub Actions and stuff is great, but you know, that's just me. So we'll see. Again, I think a lot of this is just like corporate speak, trying to get the right optics here for shareholders and all that jazz.
Yeah, I think that as long as GitHub repos suddenly don't have Microsoft Copilot just trying to shove itself into them and into the website in general. I mean, Microsoft has done a good job of leaving GitHub kind of alone, except for giving it infrastructure and money to extend its capabilities and its functions. So I really hope that continues and that they continue to leave GitHub to doing things the way that it, has been beneficial for everybody. I guess we'll just have to reserve judgment on that now that there's no one person who's kind of representing that organization. But I feel like they've done a good job so far being stewards of GitHub. So I want to continue to think that they'll continue down that path and won't, make every developer who uses GitHub, which is most of us, angry and want to look at other options.
Which there are plenty of Microsoft. Just want to say.
It's not hard for me to point my repo somewhere else and push and be done. Yeah.
As an open source maintainer, I've started to see an uptick in very obviously spam generated or AI generated spam issues and pull requests. And there have also been people talking about using AI to detect these AI generated spam pull requests and issues, including an AI moderator action from GitHub itself. So perhaps this is a good direction for the team to go.
Hey, we've created a problem and we will sell you the solution.
Okay. Do we think that there will be more acceleration of AI features like Copilot now that GitHub is getting folded more and more into Microsoft's AI core efforts?
I mean, there has to be. I feel like we are just figuring out context, like in 2025. The fact that RAG was like the way to do it, which I don't want to knock that opinion. Like it's kind of the best that we had for a while, but now we're kind of agreeing that there's more nuanced ways that we can collect context and deal with that context. And it's amazing to see how little you need to do so much as long as you figure out the right little. And that's a new science that's being developed and being propulsed forward very quickly. So I'm sure that'll translate into a variety of new experiences that actually work.
And I mean, MCP servers didn't even exist at the beginning of this year. And now they're one of the hottest tools that people are figuring out how to build and use in a standard-ish way. So that all these AI agents that we have everywhere can interact more thoughtfully and effectively with APIs and web applications and things like that. So, yeah, I think they're definitely going to continue to put more AI into it. Hopefully, they just continue to very thoroughly vet it before they roll it out, because the community will tear it down if it doesn't perform well.
There have been some exciting non-AI UI improvements on GitHub as well. They've been demoing and showing off betas of new issue search and pull request review pages. So it does feel like they're not just working on AI. They're actually implementing new product features at the same time. Well, before we go on to our hot takes, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. This episode is brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. Ad break. And welcome back, folks. Now we are on to my favorite part of the podcast, the hot takes. Everyone here has prepared up to 3 hot takes that they are going to have to share with us over 2 to 3 minutes. Let's start with you, Paige. What's on your mind?
Well, I feel like we've kind of covered these hot takes already, but I'll lay them out in real blunt fashion. So first one is that I think a whole bunch of these AI funded companies are going to fold within the next year. And I don't necessarily mean like the big open AIs and the Anthropics, but I think that the ones that are built on top of them, like, video, AI generated video and AI generated voiceovers and the million AI activity tracker, note taker, whatever organizers, I think a bunch of those are going to disappear, because people are realizing that just because it has AI in it doesn't necessarily make it good. And the AI is not deterministic enough in a lot of cases to do what you want it to do. So I think a lot of those projects that were very excited and very bullish are just going to either get closed and defunded, or those companies are going to fold up. So be prepared to see, I think, a lot of that happening within the next year. The other hot take that I'm going to have is that, yes, it takes me less time to write code when I'm using AI, but I also feel like it takes me longer to QA that code to make sure that it's doing what I expect it to do. So we were talking about the 10x engineer earlier, and it's kind of a trade-off. It's like, yeah, this code is generated a lot quicker. However, I have to be a lot more picky, I guess, and more test driven to make sure that it's doing everything and that edge cases are handled, weird use cases are covered. So it's probably saving me time in the long run, but also it's making me take more time in other areas. So it's kind of a trade-off. But, it's just, I guess, just getting more efficient with the tools, better with how I prompt the AI and break down problems into smaller components that it can handle better. So it's a learning curve, like we were talking about. But yeah, just boy, if you're generating code like that and it has to be a production application, please just test the heck out of it, or else it's going to come back to bite you later.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like a learning curve and a weird discipline, right? There's always this like temptation, like you do a prompt, you do like test the happy path and it works. It's like, okay, this is probably fine. And like I'll prompt again, then before you know it, you've got 4,000 lines written of code that you've like tested the happy path on 5 times. Like, it can be an uncomfortable place for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Next up, Paul, how are you feeling today?
So I know a lot of younger folks getting into the space, tech space right now. Graduated from university last year, graduating this year, been out for a year or two. And yeah, the job market is impossible right now. I think this is no secret. I just am so sick of seeing all the posts about how it's all doom and gloom. Like it's not. I think we're figuring out the job market right now, and the job market's going through an immense shift. I don't think that is a beacon or signal of like, oh, all these jobs are going to disappear. Like, no, we still need people. People are valuable. People drive all this other stuff we've talked about on the podcast. So this is more of a positive hot take. If you're trying to enter the field, I feel like there's a lot of dust in the air right now, and the dust is going to settle. And don't listen to the doom and gloom of The Economist, because they like to post about how there's no more tech jobs a lot. Or if you go on Reddit/CS career questions, it's very doom and gloom over there. Just keep practicing at something, I guess. And on the flip side, though, what I do see potentially happening is a lot of these entry-level jobs just being lower paid, because we're going to figure out as high efficiency teams how to use these tools, put forth guardrails, and then hire people with less experience who might be entering the field and say, hey, you can go do all this stuff, and it's in this nice boundary using these tools. Bad thing is we don't have this big like black to gray to white scale of skill. There's going to be more of a polarization on either side. But again, coming back to, this does not mean the jobs are disappearing. It's just a different way to define your value in the company. So it's a little bit against the grain of what you're seeing online and on Reddit. But we'll see. I'm just a guy.
Speaking of people who are guys, Noel, what is on your mind today?
Yeah. So this is kind of off of our last one, talking about Cloudflare blocking, or configuring users' websites with setting defaults even for users' websites and how things will be accessed. I feel like it kind of brought me back to when Cloudflare did some of their work to like globally block certain like hate focused websites. I don't remember how long this was, like a couple years ago. Which like I agree. Like I don't want this kind of like information propagating like and out there, but it does always like irk me a little bit. And we've got this just like the centralization of the internet entities is always a little bit concerning. And I'm like, I'm a happy Cloudflare user and customer and all these things, but like, and I don't even want to say necessarily in this instance like they've overstepped their bounds, especially given like how big of a role they've played in like anti-denial of service. Like they're kind of already in this gross miasma of like what what is our role as an arbiter of the internet here? But I always have a little bit of pause whenever I read any of these things. It's like, do we want just like even more entities that can step in here and be like, no, like this content is no longer accessible? Because then as soon as that power, like shifts one way or another, it's more centralized. It's always more prone to being undermined and at the whim of like the given individual, of a given individual. So like that stuff always gives me a little bit of pause. And I saw like some discourse about this, but it was more like on the tech kind of hacker side, and like, the Twitter blue sky sphere really wasn't chatting about it as much as I would have liked to have seen. So I don't know. That's just been on my mind a little bit as of late.
I've got a couple of hot takes on my own. The first of which is I think AI is pretty darn good now in the average case. I just went on a trip through Yellowstone and Grand Teton over in Wyoming, and
Nice.
My friend used AI to plan the vast majority of the trip. We had tried something similar a year ago, and it just couldn't figure things out, kept hallucinating, lying to us. But this time, just using the very basic ChatGPT, it was phenomenal performance. I think all these complaints from folks on podcasts about how the hallucinations and lies are bad have actually been addressed in a lot of the common models. So it's nice to see that things are pretty good for average folks. The second hot take that I have is I think there's a really interesting parallel with how ride-sharing apps have been rolling out or were rolled out to how AIs were. There was, of course, the big hype bubble with Web VR and Web3, and all those kind of cracked because, as we said, they were much more niche than all these AIs. But Uber, for example, in New York City used to be shockingly inexpensive, much less costly than taxis. And of course, it was a giant loss leader for the company. They lost unknown amounts of millions of dollars. And now that we've all become dependent on Uber and most of the competitors have gone out of business, of course, they and Lyft have raised their prices. So I think that there's going to be a similar thing, and perhaps already is starting to be a similar trend with AIs, where now that we're dependent on them, before local AIs become really popular and able to be used easily, they're just going to, drain the money out of us while they can.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. That was my similar thought, like on your initial questions of like, where does this bubble go? It's like, yeah, there's this where does that efficiency, how efficient can we get on that like curve? Like, where is that eventual point of the market settling this out? And maybe Google will just eat everyone and it'll all just be in Google search. That'll be
it's either going to be that or I think it's going to be other AI companies just acquiring other services they can bake themselves into. Like Perplexity bought Windsurf or bought the leftovers from Windsurf. So they're going to use that as their IDE and bake Perplexity into that probably. And they offered, although I'm sure Google will not take them up on it, they offered to buy Chrome for more than their company is worth or valuated at the moment.
Yeah.
But obviously they would
$34.5 billion or something.
Yeah. They would bake themselves into Chrome if that was something that they owned. So I think it's almost going to be like an arms race of how many other SaaS tech companies or services can I acquire that I can use my AI engine in, and maybe that's how they're going to make money, or that's probably some people's ideas of how they'll make money off of it, is just bake it into everything else and then charge accordingly.
Paige, is very interesting, the ordering or the direction of the purchase that you described. Previously, if you have a specific kind of tool, a company that already has a product will buy that tool. But what you've suggested and indeed pointed out an example of is the tool company buying the product. That's not normal. Well, any other hot takes that we should air before the episode is over?
Off of the models are getting good, Josh. I feel you. Share that observation, and I think that's going to bubble up into independence somewhat with AI. There's pretty compelling models we're starting to run locally. I don't know if you guys have tried 70B or like any of the Quen models. They're not terrible. Like, you can get pretty good performance out of them, and now you get Kilo code that's, you can plug anything you want into it. So I definitely see a future in the next year or two. If you can save up, a few $1,000s, you can get yourself an amazing powerhouse, and you're completely independent. You're completely offline. And if you know what you're doing, I don't know, that seems like a bright future too. Another bright hot take. I think there's more independence interlaid throughout this discussion than Uber, because in Manhattan, I'm truly at a loss. I don't know where to go.
You can't download a car.
Yeah.
Not yet.
All right. Well, this has been a lovely episode. We've talked about AI and the industry, the hype, the anxiety, the nerves, the pros, the cons. We had some hot takes. This has been Paige, Paul, Noel, and Josh for LogRocket. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Thanks, Josh.
See you next time.